Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining our webinar. We wait some more minutes for more colleagues to join, and soon we come back. Thank you very much. Thank you to all participants having joined in time this webinar. We start in 3 minutes. Meanwhile, you might want to check the Corruption Perception Index and look where your country stands. Thank you. Hey, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. My name is Valbona, and I will facilitate this webinar. Thank you for joining us today. This webinar is hosted by Helvetas Regional Advocacy Network. Today, we tackle one of the most persistent and complex challenges, corruption, and how different sectors and stakeholders across the Western Balkan and Eastern Europe are addressing it in practice. This webinar would not have been possible without the contribution and support from SDC-funded projects, Optim in Moldova, Prague in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and strong municipalities in Albania, all implemented by Helvetas. Thank you as well to the contribution of the Regional Anti-Corruption Initiative Secretariat sitting in Sarajevo, Basel Institute on Governance in Switzerland, and Ohrid Institute for Economic Strategies and International Affairs. Some housekeeping, I kindly ask everyone to only mute microphone once talking. Use, please, proactively the chat for any question. This session will be recorded, and for sure we will share it afterwards in our Regional Advocacy Network webpage. In this webinar, we will explore how anti-corruption frameworks at international, national, and grassroots level work, and how to translate them into real policy impact. We'll hear 3 case studies from public, private, and civil society sector, followed by a panel discussion with leading regional experts. Indeed, at the end, we'll have the chance to address questions to key speakers. Please do it proactively. Your voice is very important. Let me now introduce the first speaker, Peter San, Senior Advisor on Governance and Public Service from Helvetas, who will tackle the topic of corruption, a persistent global and regional challenge. Peter San, the floor for you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Valbona. Hi, everyone. And that's a real pleasure, actually, to contribute to this rich discussion on a timely topic, actually. So my presentation today, well, as Albona said, I'm the Senior Advisor on Governance and Public Services, working at Helvetas and sitting in Bern office. So my presentation today, I will focus on 3 specific topics. First of all, I will try to clarify, let's say, or define what we're talking about when we talk about corruption. What does that mean? Because it's a complex issue. And second, I will try to highlight or present some global trends to actually showcase how or why corruption is relevant. And third, I will outline several approaches, non-exhaustive, but approaches for the purpose of the webinar that are commonly used to fighting corruption. Next. So the debate around the definition of corruption is quite extensive, and it's not an easy task actually to provide a definition that fully captures the complexity of the phenomenon. However, for the purpose of the webinar, we would like to use the Transparency International's definition that goes like the abuse of entrusted power for private gain. And so to unpack this definition, I'd like to briefly refer to this conceptual pyramid that is developed by the Center for the Study of Corruption at the University of Sussex to explain the different bits of the definition. So first of all, abuse of power, as it is presented, it is certainly illegal. It's an illegal act. But most of the time, corruption can also take place within a legal framework. So for example, in some authoritarian or de facto regimes, some institutional reforms may be implemented or enacted in a way that facilitates corruption to happen or benefit ruling party or strengthens repressive power structures to undermine transparency, accountability, integrity, or restrict, for example, people's participation or women or people in vulnerabilities participation. So most of the time, people talk about institutional corruption or electoral corruption or bureaucratic corruption, etc. So this is where the institutions or the law are actually enacted in a way that actually facilitate or sustain corruption within public services. Another bit of the definition I'd like also to address is what they call the entrusted power. What does that mean? So it refers to positions which individuals or a given authority they refer trust and authority to an individual or a public officer. And corruption happens when this power is abused for a private personal gain or a partisan gain. So, but what does that mean, the gain? So the gain is the incentive behind corruption. It happens because corrupt actors want to gain something privately, or that can be monetary or non-monetary form. For example, on the part of public servants, they may want to gain more power over distribution of a public benefits or impose more cost or cost to supposed public services and goods, gain more discretionary power, for example, for decision rather than rule-based power, or acquire valuable government contracts. So people and institutions who commit crimes may also seek to make payoff to avoid arrest or prosecution. So in short, private gain means that individuals will seek to minimize the cost imposed on them or government or democratic institutions, while firms and business will try to maximize profits by distorting the rules or distorting the markets. So as you can see in the screen, so on the right side, you have an interconnected circle that actually addresses a broad range of different sorts of corruption or economic crime or fraud. We will not have time to address all of them, but I think that I wanted to give the picture to actually showcase the complexity behind the definition of corruption and also incentives behind it. Next. And so I'd like to talk about the global trends. So as Valbona just shared, the Transparency Corruption Perception Index. So as you can see on the map, the red areas represent countries perceived as highly corrupt. If we take a closer look, we will see significant corruption levels in many parts of the world, mostly in South Africa, the Caribbean, where I come from, for example, in North Africa, in the Horn of Africa. So that means that corruption remains deeply entrenched, rooted across the world, both in public sector, but also in private sector. Next. At the same time that CPI highlights widespread corruption in the world in this perception index, I would like also to talk about this global organized crime index that show the criminal networks are also becoming more pervasive. So the criminal market is increasingly complex, made up of both national and transnational networks. Criminal actors are leveraging technology, collaborating with corrupt political elites, and exploiting weak judicial and financial institutions to expand their operations. And the global context also do not facilitate the fight against corruption as more contexts become more fragile, and then the corrupt actors take the opportunity of this fragilization to expand the networks, but also to complexify the networks as well. So you will see in this map the wide range of criminal actors that we have, and also criminal activities that actually expand the criminal markets, not only nationally, but also globally and regionally. Next. And the Global Organized Crime Index also talk about the resilience capacity. So what does the capacity that the states have to actually combat corruption, to fight against corruption? And the resilience capacity assesses the country's ability to combat criminal markets and actors, but also these include transparency and accountability, political leadership, economic regulatory capacity, and the strength of the judicial system, among others. But as you can see on the map, while the criminal map shows an increase of the criminal activities in the criminal markets, you will see that here the resilience capacity of the states is declining. Next. So in terms of trends also that I would like to show is the OECD's public integrity indicators that provide a benchmark for how government resist corruption risks and strengthen public integrity. So in this, in your screen, you will see a framework of 6 data clusters. But unfortunately, we on the OECD website, there are only 3 data clusters for which we could actually gather information. So it's accountability of public policy making, effectiveness of internal control, and strategic framework quality. So what does that mean? So the accountability in public policy making means that these are sets of indicators that covers regulations and practice related to conflict of interest management, lobbying, political finance, and transparency of public information. So if you see on your left, up left, you will see that the data reflect low levels of trust in parliaments to act without political influence, low confidence in government, and a lack of transparency procedures in lobbying activities. On your right up, there's the effectiveness of internal control risk management. So this set of indicators cover regulations and practice on public sector internal control, internal audit, and risk management. And you will see that the data reveal major gaps, lack of internal audit practices, weak central level reporting, and insufficient risk management in terms of budget planning, budget organizations, and budget forecast. And lastly, we have the strategic framework quality. This strategic framework quality assess the robustness of national anti-corruption strategies adopted at the highest levels of government, cabinet, president, or parliaments. And you will see that the score are generally low as well, which shows that there's an important lack of strategic quality framework to fight against corruption in the OECD data count, the countries that the OECD data covered. But one thing that I would like also to highlight here, you will see that there's a white line. The white line is a comparison that I've made between the OECD countries and the Southeast Europe for 2024 data. So you will see that it's quite interesting. We'll not have time to deep dive into it, but it's quite interesting that there's a kind of differences in terms of where sometimes in Southeast Europe, some indicators are well performed, and in some cases, some indicators are weak performed. But it's quite interesting to see that we will see it in another data set. But it's quite interesting to see that there's a lot of efforts that are being made also in Southeast Europe in terms of those indicators: accountability, effectiveness, and quality of strategic framework. And then the three other sets of indicators relate to integrity of the justice and disciplinary system, strength, and meritocracy of the public services. But I will not deep dive into it because we don't have time for that. Next, please. So these are so what I did here, but I'm just gonna talk quickly about it. I've taken this worldwide governance indicators of the World Bank to show a comparison between Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Moldova, and North Macedonia. So you will see that for those 4 countries in these governance indicators, so there's 2 key indicators that I would like us to see. It is the voice and accountability and control of corruption. So from 1996 till 2024, you will see that the trends remain almost the same. So there are it's below the 50 of percentile rank. So that means that some efforts have been made, but not a lot that actually allowed those countries to go beyond the 50 rank. So that means that in terms of big trends for these 4 countries, in terms of control of corruption, voice and accountability, there remain a lot of efforts to be made. Next. And I'd like to talk about the cost of corruption. And next, and for the cost of corruption, I have really 6 statements. I will not go deep dive into it, but 6 statements that those data actually reminds us. It's that corruption erodes the social contract, weakens trust between citizens and the state, and fractures bonds of collective responsibility. Next, corruption also fuels political instability and erodes democratic governance by undermining public institutions, distorting accountability, and concentrating power in unaccountable hands. Next, corruption also reduces investment, deters innovation, and slows economic growth. So according to the IMF, for example, it is costing the global economy an estimated of 2.6 trillion annually. So that means 50% of global GDP. Next, corruption also weakens institutions, rendering them ineffective, safeguarding the rights and well-being of at-risk groups, thereby perpetuating inequality and social vulnerability. And next, corruption exacerbates deprivation, furthers poor health outcomes, and contributes to preventable death by diverting resources away from essential public services like healthcare, education, and social protection. And last, corruption accelerates environmental degradation, enables illegal exploitation of natural resources, and drives the decline of biodiversity, ultimately reducing both wildlife populations and human life expectancies. Next. So, and then I'd like to talk about the 3. So for the purpose of the webinar, so there are much more approaches to fight against corruption. But for the purpose of the webinar, I'd like to talk about 3 key specific approaches commonly used. The international approach that involves international organizations, international treaties, working at international and transnational levels to combat corruption across borders. The top-down approach that includes models where a single national anti-corruption agency or multiple bodies are tasked with leading the national response corruption, and the grassroots approach, which is a citizen-driven initiatives, collective action, and community-led tactics and target groups. that target corruption in its many forms, from social accountability to investigative journalism and civic tech. Next. So, well, talking about the international treaties, we will not go into it because we don't have time, actually. But I'd like to talk about some one or three of them. For example, the UNCAC, United Nations Convention Against Corruption, where this coalition is a firm network where civil society organizations actually can make the voice heard. These cover 5 key areas: prevention, criminalization and law enforcement, international cooperation, asset recovery, technical assistance, and information exchange. So 140 signatories for this United Nations Against Corruption. And by the way, the 11th session of the Conference of the State Fathers will happen in Doha in December, where civil societies will be able to make the voices heard. And there's also the Convention of Combating Bribery of Foreign Public Officials in International Business Transaction, which the key objective the aim is to criminalize bribery of foreign public officials. So the approach is a peer-driven process in which countries monitor each other to ensure the treaty's obligations are met. So it's a peer review that's happening at the OECD to actually control or monitor how countries are actually implementing the treaty at a national level. And the last one I would like to talk about quickly also is the Council of Europe. So it's the civil law and the criminal law, where the criminal law criminalizes active and passive bribery of domestic and foreign public officials, national and foreign parliamentarians, and members of international parliamentary assemblies, private sector, and international civil servants. And also the civil law actually focuses on ensuring that each party provides internal law effective to remedy for persons who have suffered damage as a result of act of corruption. And those two law actually, the Group of States Against Corruption, the GRECO, is established actually to monitor that the Council of Europe actually is observing the guiding principles of those two laws, the criminal law and the civil summit law. Well, beyond these treaties, there are multilateral and international organizations that I will not talk about, IMF, World Bank, and but mostly World Bank as a really interesting tool that they call the Public Expenditure and Financial Accountability, that actually Switzerland is a key member through SECO, where actually it's a framework to assess and report the strength and weakness of public financial management of a country. So budget reliability, revenue collection, transparent expenditure, and so on. And at the national level, thank you, at the national level, actually, so I talked about, I put national integrity system, but actually here, I will not deep dive into all of them. I would like to talk about the anti-corruption agency, because at the top-down level, there's 2 key sub-approach. There's the single agency approach and the multiple agency approach. The single agency approach is actually what you see here in the in this national integrity system. It's what they call the anti-corruption agency. So these agencies independently coordinate all actions related to corruption within the country. And they coordinate with all the pillars that you see here to investigate, educate, and sanction. So to do so, they may collaborate with other enforcement institutions as the judicial system, the police or court to prosecute, and with the private sector and business civil society to investigate and educate. So there are a lot of countries that have such anti-corruption agencies around the world, but even though sometimes their independence is questioned, but there's the Jakarta argument that actually set the principles for the the independence of the anti-corruption agencies, to promote and strengthen the independence of effectiveness and neutrality of the agencies within the national framework of fighting against corruption. And the second one is the multiple agency approach, actually. So in some countries, there are some countries don't have the anti-corruption agency, so they have different kind of regulatory bodies that perform the duties of anti-corruption agency. Well, last, the bottom-up approach. So when the national or international approach sometimes don't work, or even when they work. So the bottom-up approach actually is the citizen-driven approach, where citizens have actually a lot of key action, collective action, institutionalized participation, inventing spaces, so non-institutionalized approach to actually fight against corruption. So sometimes they can be non-violent collective action. Sometimes they can be violent collective action. I've witnessed a lot of violent collective action in Haiti, for example, where I come from, where actually the citizens want to make the voice heard. So I will not deep dive into that because I know that there are other participants that will actually go with some key examples. So I will stop here and actually answer some questions you might have. Thank you very much, and sorry to take too much time.
Thank you, Peterson, for putting especially the international framework. Now we will shift into practical examples from the region, through which we will show how anti-corruption advocacy unfolds in different contexts. Let me introduce first Arben Kopliko, coming from strong municipality. He represents the Albania case. Albania currently holds the score of 42 out of 100 on the Corruption Perception Index. And this marks a positive change of 5 points since 23, reflecting ongoing efforts and progress in addressing corruption in Albania. But Arben will tell us more. Thank you, Arben.
Thank you, Valbona. Thank you to all of you. Okay, starting from figures, seems that Albania is doing really good progress, not only in terms of economic development, but also anti-corruption. Especially, I will speak for waste management. First of all, I would like to thank Peterson for the presentation, because when I heard him, there are some elements that I see relevant for my presentation, especially this part of weakness of institutions, human costs, environmental costs, all related to cost of corruption. And in Albania, especially for human costs and environmental costs, we know and we see a lot. For human costs, we have found the easiest way to deal with. Albanians just leave the country, so we are one of the countries with highest rate of migration. But coming back to the presentation, how we can, or what we did to strengthen municipal governance through anti-corruption policies. We are a small project, Bashkit Fort, our strong municipalities, funded by SDC, working mainly on good governance, especially with municipal council, public service directories, women in politics, municipal offices for performance, and preschool education. Albania, it is true, did really good progress in terms of justice reform, starting from 2015-16, I guess, 2016. Maybe we are among these countries that we are destined to make records. Albania went to this justice reform through this vetting process. And from this vetting process, for all the colleagues that don't know, all the judges and prosecutors, or in one term, magistrates, underwent in a kind of reassessment of their qualities by an independent qualification commission for their assets, integrity, professionalism, etc. And guess what? Only 46% of them were confirmed in the office. And this was a starting point in all this long process to fight corruption in Albania. In the frame of justice reform, it was established also a special body. In Albania, it is called SPAC, but it's special anti-corruption structure. And this special anti-corruption structure dealt with high-profile cases like corruption in high levels, high ranks of ministries, institutions, or big businesses. One of the flagship cases of this SPAC were the incinerators. Incinerators in Albania is a long story. They have been planned to be constructed in Albania, 3 incinerators. We are a small country with almost 2.5 million inhabitants. And these 3 incinerators were planned to solve entirely the eternal problem of Albania of disposing the waste. They have designed 3, one in Elbasan, in Fier, and in Tirana, in 3 big cities. But after a long time, only in one of them was constructed, operated for some months, and later on stopped. In Fier never worked, while in Tirana is only in papers. But all these affairs, they were in a frame of at least 280 million euros, or as opposition claims, is a business or more than 460 million euros. And with the involvement of SPAC, ministers, deputy prime minister, members of parliament, high officials of Ministry of Environment, etc., have been jailed. And this make the turning point in linking justice with environment, with governance. And in that period of time, it is also the discussion that what about municipalities? Because municipalities, they spend a lot of money for public services. What about municipalities? Because they provide waste management service, which is one of the core services that municipalities deliver, and they spend a range of 7 to 10% of their entire budget on it. That's why all the reflectors were a little bit turned on municipalities. That's why I will tell, so I'm telling our story with simple words in order to be quite frank. We work with municipalities not only to improve the efficiency, but also to involve as much as possible other actors like citizens, municipal council, civil society, etc., to increase the service, to increase the quality of service delivery, to increase the efficiency, but also to manage properly the small amount of money that municipalities have. Because always is the discussion that we have with municipalities that they do not have enough money to provide the service in remote areas. They do not have enough money to provide the service in the villages or to do recycling or to enter in the circular economy. They do not have money to send and dispose the waste properly in the landfills because the landfills are regional-based facilities, they are far, cost of transport are too high, etc., etc., etc. So that's why we started slowly with municipalities, helping them to design instruments to improve the service. Designing these instruments to improve the service, one of them was quite simple, data collection. We encourage them to collect data, to report on data, to report for the service. But as we saw during all these years, many mayors, they prefer much more to give contracts to outsource the service because in this way they could gain much more illegally. These are the examples when we have the procurement processes and you see these red flags because the winning offer is close to 99% of the budget that municipality had available for the service. When in the procurement, there were only one company providing offers. And then the result is overpriced contracts, poor monitoring and enforcement of these contracts. And for sure, the service will suffer. Supporting municipalities for data collection and reporting, we saw some strange figures. And these strange figures you would understand easily. I would say that one of the cities in the world that has the highest rate of waste generation per capita should be in US, is New York. Now they are in this famous Abu Dhabi, etc. But in New York, it was in that period of time 1.7, 1.85 kilogram of waste per capita. But in our municipalities, small range municipalities, 35 to 60,000 inhabitants, this rate of waste generation per capita was even over 2 kilo per person. And we were saying, what are you doing, guys? Something is wrong. No, these are the figures. We have the figures from the company. We have the figures from the finance office that have paid the company. These are the figures. And then we supported municipality with simple exercises. Please, can you have a balanced bridge? Weigh the waste, because otherwise you will end up paying for nothing. Slowly introducing all these elements, we succeeded to have some more accurate figures. We introduced them some simple tools like cost calculation and tariff calculation tools. These are simple tools in terms of technicalities, but on the other side, in the terms of fight against corruption, they are a very effective one. Why? Because with cost calculation tools, we supported municipality to calculate properly the cost according to the reality. But on the other side, they had the possibility to compare these costs with other municipalities and see that different municipalities with the same geographical condition, with the same distance to dump site or regional landfill, they had huge disparities between unit costs, cost per ton or cost per inhabitant. And this was a red flag, a warning signal. On the other side, calculating the cost, usually municipalities in that time used to calculate the cost, the tariff per families or per businesses, lump sum. So per family is the same tariff for all or for businesses based on their turnover. And we ended up having the same tariff for different businesses, which had nothing to do with the principle of polluters pay. Let's take an example. There are small beauty salon or jewelry paying much more than mini markets or supermarkets. So
sorry, Arben.
Yes.
May I kindly ask to go closely to the end since we are late with time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. But I thought I have 7 minutes. Okay, we go slowly to the end. That's why with all these elements, the other element that I wanted to mention quickly is the performance reports. With the performance reports, or all municipalities report for their performance based on indicators. And these indicators as a base of comparison between municipalities. Their municipalities could see these discrepancies. All these elements, cost calculation and tariff calculation, as well as performance report, have been adopted as by the government of Albania as obligatory for all municipalities. All these instruments now are in use by municipalities, are in the hands of independent institutions like high state control or supreme audit, as well as municipal councils, civil society organization, etc. What we are trying to do to increase the pressure towards the leadership of municipalities who has the possibility to make decisions, to outsource or not the service, to spend or not the money, is to involve much more these institutions, civil society, citizens. Encouraging municipalities to publish in their web pages the contracts of the service, the schedule of and frequency of service delivery. Encouraging civil society organizations to be as a watchdog for service delivery, encouraging citizens to report, as well as all the recommendations of high state audit to be discussed in municipal council with journalists, etc., in order to open as much as possible the discussion. On the other side, with the help of Commissioner for the Right of Information, to push municipalities to publish in their web pages all this data. These are public data. These are public money. People should know about their use. I stop here.
Thank you very much, Arben, for this comprehensive bottom-up and top-down approach on anti-corruption or mainstreaming it basically in public services. So let's turn now to Bosnia-Herzegovina, which currently holds a score of 33 out of 100 on the Corruption Perception Index. This reflects a decline of 2 points since 2023, indicating rising concerns about perceived levels of public sector corruption. Amila comes from civil society and she will share her experience. The floor for you, Amila.
Thank you very much. And thank you for having me. And thank you for the opportunity to talk about the subject that is really maybe a little different and maybe something that is unfortunately unnoticed and unrecognized form of corruption, which is corruption in maternity wards, and unfortunately with huge consequences affecting hundreds and thousands of women every year with other things happening that are connected to corruptions. So if we start with the first slide, we can see that unfortunately experiences from women that we've gathered as institution baby steps shows us that they have not fear of childbirth, but fear of the system that surrounds it. They are afraid of going back to the institution because of the trauma they had. Unfortunately, there is a lot of problems happening in maternity wards, poor conditions, and obstetric violence as a form of violence against women, because what women tell us that they are neglected, that they are humiliated, that they are verbally abused, that they are sometimes even physically abused, that they are not informed of their situations, they are not asked for consent. Those are all violations, and those are all violations of law on patient rights and also on human rights. This is all obstetric violence, but what happens beneath it and with it together is something that's maybe a deeper problem, which is going unnoticed, and that's corruption. We have done research, and it showed that half of births are covered with corruption. Corruption is present in 50% of childbirth in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is really high percentage, and it's really concerning. The bigger problem in it is that it's something that's unfortunately not recognized as a problem, because women give bribe for basic care. Women give bribe to get better conditions. They give bribes to be treated with dignity, and sometimes the bribes are even needed to save baby's life, which is the biggest problem of all. So the problem going with this high percentage is that, on the other hand, we have no conviction, we have no accountability, we have nobody who gets accounted for what's happening in the maternity wards. The problem is that corruption in maternity wards is normalized. It's normalized by the staff, by women. That's something that's considered a way to get alive from the maternity ward. It's considered a way of the things work. That has to be that way. So can we go in the next one? What did we do? First, we recognized the meaning of real stories. We shared and we recorded a lot of real stories because we cannot ignore the real experiences. We cannot ignore what's happening. And we got a lot of media coverage, which made us possible to do more pressure. And media pressure helped us reach the institution because they couldn't ignore it. They couldn't stay silent when we had a lot of public and media pressure. So we made a lot of collaboration with institutions, with hospitals. We made anonymous reporting hospital systems, which is a way of women can give their responses from home. They can give their feedback to the hospital in a way of telling what's wrong and what should be better, and also report corruption, which is something that's done for first time in this manner. We also use legal tools, all of them. We're trying to work with all of the stakeholders. We're trying to support women. And what's most important, we are trying to make possible more complaints, more criminal reports, because unfortunately that's something that's not happening, because women do not trust that something will change. They don't trust the justice system, and they're afraid to report the doctors because they're afraid to going back to the hospital itself. But the most important thing that we're doing is through PREG initiative. Currently, it's an initiative for the right for a birth companion, which is a game changer for the obstetric violence and for the corruption. Why? Because when you have a woman that's not left alone you change everything, because then you have a lot less space for abuse. Bribes become riskier to demand because now we have a witness. And this is really a simple, cost-free solution which protects women, and it cuts corruption to its core. And we are now looking for political support. We are going to Parliament and asking them to make it a rule that every hospital has to make this possible for every woman in Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, because currently there is no hospital in Bosnia Federation that allows a company to be doing the whole delivery. It is usually just a couple of minutes at the end of the delivery, and you have women being there for 10 to 15 hours alone, with abuse, with corruption, and a lot of other problems. So next, what actually works is we have learned by doing this is that, first of all, giving women a voice, it's really important. All of this was a public secret in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but now by talking about it publicly, it changes things. So it is really important to give a woman a chance to say what she has to, and to say it in a place where it has some meaning and can have some kind of consequences and some kind of some way of getting something done right. Also, Birth Companion is something that's really important, that will change everything, and we are hoping to implement it and have it finally like it is in an entire world practically. Media media pressure is something that was really helpful for us. Of course, we had some challenges. We have institutional resistance. We still do, but things are changing and it's going the right way. When women are informed and when the public and media is putting pressure, things can really change. And finally, next, what we learned from all of this is that corruption is not just a symptom. It's not a side effect. It's a root cause of disrespect, of neglect, of trauma, of inequality. And it's the biggest problem is that it is hidden, it is accepted, it is rarely challenged. It is normalized by staff, by women, it is ignored by the institution itself. So that is the biggest problem. So we are fighting to expose it, to track it, to challenge it, and to fight against it, because that's that way, when we are fighting against it, we are making a change. Because it is important to include all of these stakeholders. Women, we work with women, we work with the system, with the doctors, with the prosecutors, because all of these stakeholders have their part in it. And by fighting corruption, we are fighting for equal treatment. We are fighting for accountability. We are fighting for human rights and, unfortunately, even human lives. So we believe that change is possible, not through miracles, but through persistence, through pressure, and step by step, baby steps. Thank you.
Thank you, Emilia, for bringing this grassroots dimension and efforts for changing behavior to combat corruption with different measures of your community work. Let's turn now to Moldova. Moldova currently holds a score of 33 out of 100 on the Corruption Perception Index, which reflects a modest improvement of +1 point since 2023, suggesting ongoing efforts to strengthen governance and curb corruption. Roman Ladus will share from the private sector perspective the experience of Moldova. Roman, the floor for you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity to present the story of Moldova. I am representing the Economic Council to the Prime Minister of Moldova, which is a platform of dialogue between private and public sector, and where the private and public sector try to create a favorable environment for business activities. In doing so, we of course cooperate with the policymakers, and the main policymaker is the Ministry of Economic Development and Digitalization, that has the legal initiative to promote changes in the policy and to deal with the improvements that are being generated on the platform of the Economic Council. Now, there were many attempts to streamline business activities before, but they were very sporadic and mimicking some improvements. Businesses started to lose trust and be less engaged. So that's why we came up with a different, innovative approach in approaching it in a more systemic way. So next, please. We thought that we need to map out the whole journey of a business activity, of a small business activity model through the whole regulatory realm, and try to expose how complex it is, because in a sense the regulatory map, or the whole set of obligations and procedures that businesses face, in a sense are a fertile soil for corruption in principle, because they cause lots of limitations and cost to businesses, sometimes unbearable. And then the only instance is to find a way to bribe someone to continue your work, right? So we mapped it out for several sectors. It looked very ugly. Like in this box, you can see there are plenty of, cells. So there could be 200, 300 issues that you have to deal with as a small business in your life cycle to exist. And then it's insane. So we thought we need to clean it out, and started to identify gradually, like the spots, you see the red ones, the priority issues that can be resolved, and we're packing it, started to pack them within the deregulation packages. Next, please. We started with 1, 2, 3, 4. So once we gathered sufficient material for improvements, we let it go and started to pack another one. These packages were like legal initiatives promoted by the Ministry of Economy, as I said. Next, please. So they were looking into reducing constraints, reducing the hours of bureaucracy, save money for businesses, and allow more economic activity. Next, please. And finally, ultimately, we target to a very enabled, doable environment where corruption has less space to exist, which is clear and easy for businesses to follow. Next, please. Just to give you examples, next please, of the issues we've been including into the regulation packages. For instance, we have made unmandatory the labor, so-called labor pre-contracts, because labor inspectors would check on whether you have formally employed labor, but even if so, they would say, how do you also have some kind of pre-contracts that preceded the actual contract? Of course, small businesses were not knowledgeable about it, and it was so bureaucratic, and many missed it, and it caused lots of room for abuses, for rent seeking and other behavior from inspectors. It was excluded as unnecessary. Next, please. Among other improvements, the fixed term hiring in IT sector. IT sector is very flexible. You need to, you have a volatile employment process. That's why you needed to be able to hire for fixed term. Otherwise, you try to do it informally. That's why fixed term hiring enabled to formalize more labor in this sector. Next, please. Medical fish replaced with certificate. Previously was kind of, even so since Soviet times, heritage of having a medical fish to be kept all the time by employers in sectors where there could be diseases transmitted, like hospitality sector or some interaction with clients, were very insane and complicated. If you lose them, to reproduce them, it would be insane. It was replaced by just a simple medical certificate annually done, and that's it. Next, please. Unjustified medical checks. There was some medical checks again inherited since Soviet times, some humiliating, unnecessary, not existing in other countries, and usually it was corruption, because people would pay bribes to just get a stamp or seal from a medical doctor confirming that you passed it without passing it. Next, please. EU commodity exchanges have been allowed to operate in Moldova. That increases transparency in exchange of goods and commodities, including grains, agricultural products. It's less corruption possible, and public procurement is also involved. Next, please. Cash receipt instead of tax invoices, less bureaucracy. So just cash receipt is okay for bookkeeping. Next, please. Higher low tax debt, so that you don't fall under the investigation of tax authorities unnecessarily for very low unpaid taxes. Next, please. Closing business streamline, that is pretty talking for itself. Next, please. remote hygiene training. So because again, corruption was in place there to just pretend you pretended the training, but remotely it's less effort, so you can do it and it's less avoidable. Next, please. Unpacked bakery products allowed because of COVID and other threats. There was a prohibition to sell unpacked bakery products, but some bakery products cannot be sold packed. It damages them. It makes them unsellable. That's why it was allowed, and more formalized products were brought to the market. Next, please. So my last slide. Yes, I will tell you about the impacts and how it will work out. First of all, the regulatory maps, the first one, yes. Private sector engagement was achieved better. Businesses saw that their whole problems are being well exposed, and they've been more open to communicate and tell their stories. So we got more of their engagement and contribution. Next, please. Then the regulation packages have been more possible, so you could better prioritize and resolve problems, and that made it more efficient for the development partners to get engaged and help, including Helvetas, UNDP, BRD, and many other donors got involved. And next, please, last one. The public sector became more motivated and accountable, including agencies, government, and parliament, because this put a pressure on them to resolve, because such an ugly picture could not remain. And we started to assign price tags to the deregulation package, showing how much businesses save, meaning indirectly that there would be less market for corruption. So you see, the regulation packages have some millions of euros assigned to them in annual savings to businesses, adding up to a total of about 47 million euros, which is about 0.3% of GDP. So that caused more appetite for reforms and more engagement, and more cooperation, and more resolution to the issues. So that's about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roman. Thank you, Amelia, and thank you, Arben, for showing once more what Transparency International calls the vicious cycle of weak democratic institutions. Now we have the honor to present our panelists, the three distinguished panelists who will guide us through to international, regional, and national experiences. They are Claudia Camargo from Basel Institute of Governance, Biljana Ladeva from Orit Institute, and Nikola Naumovsky from Regional Anti-Corruption Initiative. Thank you for accepting to brainstorm with us about the international frameworks on anti-corruption, but even the grassroots and bottom-up practices which have delivered results. Maybe the first question for you is, what do the experiences of three countries tell us about aligning international anti-corruption frameworks with the political and institutional realities in Western Balkan and Eastern Europe? The floor for who would be willing? Maybe we start with Claudia.
Sure. I'm happy to get us started. And hi, everybody. Really good to be here and be part of this conversation. I think I would like to make 3 points to get us started. The first one, which I think was really well reflected in all 3 case studies, is that as Peterson told us at the beginning, corruption is a big concept. And it's quite abstract, right? It's the abuse of entrusted power for private gain. And we must recognize this is an umbrella term. I think in my experience, having been working in this field for more than 16 years now, I'm not sure it's particularly useful for operational purposes. I think that we need to be more granular as to what are the specific types of corruption that we are trying to address. So it might be, fraud in waste management processes, it's bribery in health facilities, it's, bribery that comes out as a response to overregulation. But I think if we're more precise, it helps us on the one hand be more granular as to what are the responses that are needed. And secondly, I mean, we are living in very polarized times, and corruption as an umbrella term is often used indistinctively as a political weapon. And I think that we need to maybe step away from that in order to be more effective in seeing the changes we want to see. The second thing I would want to say is that it's about how do we bring these good international and national legal frameworks to the ground. One thing that I can tell you, and this comes from my experience working in this region, but also in other regions, this is something that I see everywhere, is that people say, well, yes, there are improvements that can be done to the legal framework, like in the case of what Roman is explaining to us in the case of Moldova, but, there are laws that are quite good and solid. The problem is the implementation gap. So where these good frameworks meet reality, and the gap is too big. So one of the things that I'm very keen on bringing attention to is that besides ensuring that we have good legal and regulatory frameworks, anti-corruption is also to a large degree about behavior change. And I really like that in the presentations, for Vashkite Forta. I mean, I know this project, I've worked with you, and I know that it really has made a difference in terms of changing the way these beneficiary municipalities are managing their affairs. So this is behavior change. Also, in the case of Bosnia, it is clear that in terms of what Amila has told us, it's also about behavior change, right? On the part of the health facility staff, in terms of the users. And in the case of Moldova, I would just add that I'm very happy to be part of an SDC funded project there that is precisely working with SMEs and local government actors to make sure that these good efforts at deregulating and that and addressing root causes of corruption are actually taken up by the relevant actors. So so behavior change, I think, is an important thing. And my last point is just, going back into the more, broad situation where we are. I think that we need to, we're obviously in a period of very drastic change internationally and as well as nationally in terms of the narratives. I fear that there might be a closing space for anti-corruption. Peterson was included in his list of international instruments, the FCPA, and that Donald Trump has already made clear his government is no longer interested in enforcing, right? And that sends a signal. So I think my final point is just to plead and to maybe brainstorm together how we can be more strategic about fighting corruption. I think that the notion of mainstreaming is very important, mainstreaming anti-corruption into sector projects. So it's not, these, again, politically incendiary term, corruption, you are corrupt, you're not corrupt, but rather how do we practically make sure that that the investments that are being done in sectors such as waste management, such as health, etc., are protected from the costs of corruption. So let me stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. Let's turn to Nicola from your regional perspective, Nicola.
Okay, I hope you can hear me. It was very interesting to hear all the presentation. And as you said, from our regional perspective, completely different information from we are doing on an everyday basis as a RAI. We are having these countries that are member states. Usually we are working on the highest level of government officials within our meetings, also with civil society, with academia, but these are real stories behind the, let's just say, local communities, behind the people. What I was reminded by listening first Peterson's presentation, the slide with the costs, it reminded me in every campaign that we were listening into the region, you know, when opposition politicians are saying, okay, these are the costs of the current government. They didn't make like 5 kindergartens or 3 schools or 2 bridges or something that is, let's just say, necessary to the society. So within the campaigns, these costs actually shows what is missing, what corruption has eaten within this local environment. Also, when I was listening Arben's presentation, I mean, this topic is waste management. Several years ago, or like 15, 20 years ago, I was listening the same story in my country, in Serbia. I mean, there was a big scandal about this waste management, but we never get the closure of this story. That's important to hear the closure of the story. What happened at the end? Who is responsible? I mean, when you listen to Mila's and Arben's story, lack of transparency leads to no accountability. So if you don't have accountable person for the thing happened, the thing will repeat. So I think all of us in the region have the similar problem in our countries related to waste management or these unfortunate scenes within the maternity hospitals. I mean, it's really heavy to hear these stories, but I'm sure that all problems that our medical staff has, lack of capacity, lack of institution, lack of funds, is not excuse for doing things like this. I mean, I'm glad that project like Camila's is doing on this thing, and that they are visible, that there people can hear this. Also, what I want to hear from the perspective of the RAI as a regional organization, Moldova, Bosnia, Albania, North Macedonia, they are all our member states. And preparing for this webinar, I was, let's just say, reading this EU country reports. I was preparing our papers in projects that we are implementing. And what I can say, I mean, it is visible that Albania has made a progress. I mean, what Arben explained, I was just referring to the recommendation from the European country report. These are the results that they shown in the EU integration process. But as Ms. Vice Camargo said, all countries lack of implementation results. So I think in next period, all of the countries in the region should put attention to the implementation. Yes, it's easy to say this. The biggest problem that all we face is lack of human resources. A lot of, let's just say, people are leaving our countries, going in some Western countries or some faraway countries. So we need to be efficient with what we get. So we need to be proactive in planning, but also in counting on people that we are doing our business and planning our activities. That's for me now. Thanks.
Thank you, Nicola, for bringing the perspective of a network of member states combating corruption with different measures. Now let's go to civil society. Biljana represents a network of 17 civil society organizations in North Macedonia. How that sounds for you, Biljana?
It sounds like the civil society has a critical role to play. And I cannot emphasize it enough because the civil society is also provider of services, as we heard with baby steps, of protection, also the data research and analysis. So in order to have really strengthened fight against corruption, you need a strong civil society and also a multifaceted co-joint network of civil society organizations. From our example, we are a network, which is a national network of platform of organizations for anti-corruption, but we all bring something different on the table. We have organizations who are doing active monitoring, watchdog, policy proposals, advocacy, judicial protection, and all of this makes the case even stronger. Not to say too much. It has to also be very crucial to have a dialogue and very sustainable dialogue with the public institutions and the private sector. We heard about very successful initiatives which involve the dialogue, but my point that I want to accent on is the sustainability of this dialogue, because we have had in the last 5 years at least, we have had very successful dialogues also in the country, but it's much affected by elections, it's affected by institutional changes, bureaucratic procedures, etc., which also lead us to have a longer period of time with not really effective dialogue, or not really delivering the changes or the frameworks we need to continue. What I see as common denominator within all these cases that were presented are the weak institutions, or not enough institutional capacity, or even human capacity, which is crucial to combat corruption, especially within. But also what is very important is the political will. And through the successful story of Albania, we saw how the political will to actually do something and provide transparency tools and data are crucial in order for the success not only of the initiative, but also for delivering tangible results, and also showing the people how it can function, how it can be done. But it is very dependent on time. Like, you can have political will in the moment, but what happens in the next period, or the next elections, or the next leadership, people in power. So even if the frameworks exist, even if dialogues exist, again, political will is a crucial factor that needs to be taken into consideration. Also, there is an implementation gap, I would say, because we have international frameworks, we have domestic bodies, we have domestic frameworks, legislation, everything set for robust anti-corruption initiatives and delivering tangible results. But the actual implementation on the ground and the actual measurable results on the ground, even on local level, that is a key problem, because not only that different factors influence it, but also this corruption mentality really eats it from local and human level. And this is something which needs to be very, very closely considered. I come from North Macedonia, and we had a actual recent case where because of corruption, many young people died and were injured. It was the Kočani catastrophe with by discotheque not having the proper licenses because of corruption on the local level, and because not having proper protection of the customers. The building was not properly set, so it caught on fire and collapsed and killed and injured many people. This is a very practical result of corruption, and very a case which is a wake-up case, I would say, because you have the frameworks, you have the legislation, but you don't have the enforcement on the ground. So this is the thing where civil society should really focus on, and should really converge the bottom-up and top-down approaches. We really need to work on this impact and inclusion of all the factors which are important in order to change the narrative, to change the scope, and change the situation.
Thank you, Biljana.
That would be, yes, thank you.
Thank you very much for your reaction and bringing as well real life cases, which belong not only to North Macedonia. We've seen in other countries in Western Balkan these root causes of corruption. Now I would like to invite in dialogue as well with key speakers. It's burning in the chat. I would like to invite Nicolina and Amila in a dialogue. Let me call it what drives the energy for change, why there are so many obstacles. Nicolina, I would like you to address the question to Amila, and maybe Amila shares her experience. Nicolina?
Of course. Thank you, Albona. Can you hear me, first of all?
Yes.
Perfect. Once again, thanks to all of the panelists for the insightful presentations, and a special thanks goes to Amila, of course, for presenting not only the Prague initiative we are all fighting for, but also and advocating for, but also for mentioning all the challenges she and her team in baby steps are going through, especially in this challenging environment, not only, I would say, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but also regionally and maybe globally. But anyways, Amila, you kind of gave a brief, let's say, overview as an answer on my questions. So as an activist, this is the question for you from a perspective as an activist. What keeps you motivated to keep active in this challenging environment, as I mentioned, not only in Bosnia and Herzegovina as a state, but regionally and globally?
Thank you very much, Nicolina, and thank you for your kind words. I ask myself sometimes the same question. I will not lie, it's hard. Sometimes you hit a lot of walls and you have a lot of problems with the institution, with the system not responding. So sometimes you do wonder, what are you doing for? What are you fighting for? But then you do remember, what are you fighting for and who are you fighting for? You're fighting for women who don't have anyone to support them, that are left alone, that are going through terrible things in the moment that is so important, that it may be the most important moment in the life of anybody. And when you know that, then you think about differently. I lived my life and I do every activity I do with thinking of women that were harmed in the maternity wards, that were left invalids, or that they've lost their child. And that is what gives me strength, because I don't want that to happen anymore. We want to change things. We want to make things better, and we want to give women dignity on birth. That's not so much to ask. That's really simple to change. And sometimes I don't even believe what I'm talking about, that I have to fight for something that's so basic, that's so simple to change, that doesn't cost anything. But still, what gives me the most courage is those little victories and those thank you that you get from women, that really that they react on what you're doing, that they're thankful for what you're doing, because they know that there's a lot of problems and not a lot of support. And I know they need the support, so that's why we're trying to be the support they need, and eventually to change things, because if we change one life, we have made a lot of difference, and we do hope that we are changing a lot. And after all, I always think about my own children, and I want them to go through life differently, to have better experiences, if not for the women that are giving birth right now, then for the women that will be giving birth tomorrow.
Thank you so much. And if I may just add, I think that activities that you are advocating for and people similar to you are really, really inspiring, and that we all should focus more and speak more about those activities and those achievements, especially in this negative narrative that's unfortunately surrounding all of us. So thank you once again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicolina and Amila. And we will excuse Amila because Amila needs to go in another event that will be for some more minutes with us. So use the time if there is any other question. So I invite in another round of dialogue. Let me invite Indrid, Claudia, and Biljana in the topic, is behavior change an impossible mission? Maybe Indrid, you would like to address your question to Claudia. And with behavior, we mean both behavior of people and institutions, and afterwards to Biljana. Indrid, are you with us? Indrid? Okay, maybe Indrid has an issue. However, for those who could read in the chat, Claudia, you emphasized on your presentation as well the issue of behavior change, how that works.
Thank you. And no, I don't think it's an impossible mission at all. I just think we need to put the efforts in the right place. So maybe let me give you a little bit of background how I see things and my experience informs. I think that a lot of efforts are put in ensuring there are good laws, that there are good institutions, and that people get trained. And then that's where it stops a lot of the time. I'm not saying always. We have good examples of the contrary, but broadly speaking, I think what is missing is what happens, in order to make these good laws and good institutions come to life. And this is where I think that we need to be more granular. To me, yes, the bottom-up approach, of course, is fundamental and it's important. As Viljana has explained, civil society has a huge role to play. But I think that also we need to look within the institutions that we're trying to strengthen, because having the good laws and regulations is not enough. Those stakeholders who must be, the ones in charge of bringing the institutions to life, what are their incentives? What are the motivations? How do they relate or not to each other? In many cases, it might be that the stakeholders who need to cooperate, say, for example, along the anti-corruption justice chain, there might be political economy elements where there might be rivalries and even just lack of coordination and communication mechanisms might be lacking. So it's about looking at the actual individual stakeholders who have a role to play and how do we build the relationships amongst them. So because these are not going to happen top down. I think that we need to think about social norms, which means what is the recognized accepted behavior for different situations. And I think if we adopt this kind of thinking, it is really not mission impossible. I think that we already have examples in this conversation. And Arben has given us some, Amila has given us some. You work with the stakeholders, you realize what are the incentives, you give them tools, you give them, you help them step up, and then behaviors change. So for me, it's really about being granular as to what are the incentives and the obstacles of the key stakeholders towards achieving the behaviors that we would like to see. Yeah, I could leave it at that.
Thank you, Claudia, and we excuse Ingrid being in the office with other, but we highly appreciate your question. So, Biljana, from your perspective, Ingrid brings this license issue. Is really the issue with the license, or something else should be changed there? How civil society can help?
Mentality should be changed. And this is the hardest thing to do. Change of mentality requires years and years and effort and sustained pressure and all the time putting it on the spotlight. This is how we did it. I'm from the Ohrid Institute, and we started in 2007 with political dialogue when it was non-existent. It was not a thing, and then it was a benchmark. Top-down approach, benchmarked from the EU, started working on continuous political dialogue to have the first results in 2015. So it's a long process, and it needs to start from the youth, even from, I liked what Arben said about preschools, preschool programs for anti-corruption, genius. It should start from there. It should start from educating the youngsters. And that is how you change the mentality gradually until they're older and they're able to influence more. That's the multiplication factor. That's the multifaceted approach that we're looking for. But is that the time that we have? Probably we need to think about more sustained efforts and multiplication, but that is the start. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon, and it needs to be invested in from earliest age. So I would go with education. I totally agree with everything Claudia said, but adding also education from earliest age and sustained pressure on all levels. Thank you.
Thank you, Biljana. Let me go to Adriana. Adriana already wrote on the chat, and you, Adriana, are an advocacy lead coming from Alliance 2015. Are you with us?
I am, and I'm actually switching on my camera to be more visible.
Great, Adriana.
Can you see me? And can you hear me well?
You.
Okay.
Excellent. You are an advocator of change, and you listened on different voices and different constraints. What we should do differently in our advocacy work? What's your feeling after listening to these practices and international frameworks?
Yeah, well, thanks. I think this has been really an excellent opportunity for me, first of all, to indeed start connecting issues more effectively. I think we tend, I mean, really talking from my own experience and, based on what I see from the international civil society, I think we tend to separate areas and to work in a bit of a, segmented way without necessarily connecting processes nor international frameworks. And this is the sense of what I wrote in my comment in the chat. I think, knowing of this incredible international framework against corruption, it's something very tangible that we should bring into our advocacy on different frameworks like the UNFCCC, so the Climate Change Convention and the Paris Agreement, for example, because this is one of the areas I'm working on. Because if we think of that, for example, there's a great potential for corruption in those projects, in the many contracts, in the multi-million investments that many countries undertake for the sake of climate neutrality, for example. So why not expanding, why not bringing these anti-corruption advocacy also in that apparently, different area, but yet in the practice very closely connected. So this is what that's my perspective. This is what I would do in my own work. And I would really encourage other advocates to do the same and to bring a cross-cutting approach to anti-corruption, just as we do it on human rights approaches. Anti-corruption and human rights, as we have seen, are so closely connected. So I think these can be really mutually reinforcing claims and strategies, and that eventually all lead to greater development outcomes, greater climate action, better human rights records, etc. So I think connecting frameworks, connecting processes would be, I think, a very winning strategy for our advocacy.
Thank you, Adriana.
Thanks for this opportunity.
For sharing your impressions. We go towards the end of this discussion, and my feeling is that corruption is a threat that does far more than undermine development. It is a key cause of declining democracy, instability, and human rights violation. By thanking all participants, key speakers, especially for the cases they brought, and Peterson for the frame he puts for us. I would like to encourage you to continue write in the chat, but give the floor for the last word, to panelists with just one word answer. What we should do differently and what we should keep doing. Just one word. Claudia, floor for you.
Thank you. Differently, let's be really, really granular about the typologies of corruption that we want to address and the exact behaviors that we want to change. What we should keep doing is addressing these topics at a different level, from the top down, from the bottom up, in between, from all perspectives, because it's a complex problem.
Thank you. Nicola.
Well, I would suggest let's support making of a good institutional setup. Let's support and encourage brave people who are doing in the system to be able to prosecute all these anti-corruption cases, and let's support not only as representatives of organization but as citizens, just say all good efforts in direction of fighting against corruption.
Liliana.
I would say keep the dialogues running, keep not only the state national dialogues, but also international, because we have so much in common and we should share on daily basis everything that we do as civil society, but also as institutions, because the challenges are common and the solutions are common. And then what we should probably do differently, integrate anti-corruption education from preschool to the end of life practically, because it's very, very important in order to change the mentality. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was great to listen to the challenges, but even solutions provided from all of you. Regional Advocacy Network of Helvetas is committed to advance this dialogue and work, especially in the framework of advocacy. We believe that there is a power on advocacy to change the present situation, and not just influence on policy making, but even in policy implementation. However, now I would like to invite Bernd Steinman, with whom I share the facilitation task of Regional Advocacy Network. He is Development Policy Coordinator at Helvetas, for wrapping up with his observation. What does it mean for advocacy and policy influence, the topics, the solutions, the challenges we heard?
Thank you, Valbona, for passing on this mission impossible to summarize this webinar. I am really overwhelmed, I have to admit. I thought this was an excellent exchange, excellent case studies, excellent introduction, and a really interesting panel discussion. So I found it very difficult to wrap up very briefly this webinar, but I will try my best. So for me, the key things I learned in this webinar is, first of all, that corruption, there are very different forms of corruption, and we have heard it many times from Peterson, but also then from Claudia in the panel. Corruption is not just bribery. It takes on many different forms. It happens everywhere, and it's not so easy to detect. So we require these kind of granular approaches, which Claudia emphasized over and over again, to be able to respond to the different ways of corruption. What really struck me is the huge costs and the different types of costs corruption can actually have. It's not just economic costs, which can be measured in the laws of GDP, which is important, but there is much more to it. There are social costs, there are human costs, which we have heard so impressively with the example from Bosnia and Herzegovina. The encouraging thing is that there are lots of different approaches at all different levels. We have also heard that from Peterson, but also very well illustrated by the three different cases: bottom up, at the local level, at the national, at the regional, and even at the global level, with lots of different international frameworks and treaties being at our disposal, which we can refer to and actually use also for policy dialogue. The three examples have illustrated all of this very, very well. First of all, how to work with municipalities in Albania, focus on data collection, get the figures right, insist on performance reports, and create transparency on these figures. Then the really heartbreaking example from Bosnia and Herzegovina, which was a really powerful illustration of the human toll of corruption, which is very real. And but to see that something can be done about that, and that advocacy for this birth companion system can actually be a solution to not just improve the livelihoods of these people, of these women, but also dry out opportunities for corruption at the same time. And then the example from Moldova, I also found it very interesting from a policy point of view, because I understood how meaningful and targeted deregulation can really target corruption in a very effective manner across all different sectors. Roman was citing examples from the health sector, IT, commodity exchange, even bakery products were mentioned. So it's a properly made deregulation, which is built on solid and sound institutional and legal analysis, can be a very effective tool to dry out corruption. And there we have seen that there is a concrete benefit in terms of GDP gains. I think, and then the panel just like reiterated many of these messages. Again, the need for granular approaches to and responses to different forms of corruption. A blueprint approach will obviously not work. We also heard that the context is not in favor of anti-corruption, be it at the global level, with all the developments we see going on in the US and elsewhere, but also at the regional level, as one panelist pointed out, that the brain drain in the Western Balkans and Eastern Europe is posing a real challenge to anti-corruption, also leading to lack of institutional capacities. We also heard very impressively that civil society has a key role to play in different roles as a watchdog, with advocacy, with policy dialogue, because having good frameworks and institutions is important, but in the end it also comes down to how these frameworks are being lived up to, how individuals interpret them, and what people make out of them. And we ended on a very important note regarding behavior change, that in the end it's about individuals, and we need to understand what drives them, what social norms influence those people. And this is not a sprint, but a marathon, as Biljana pointed out, and we should even start at preschool level to address these issues. So this is a long shot and will not be solved within a few weeks from now. But the encouraging thing and the key takeaway I take with me is that advocacy is not just affected by corruption, that was the way I was looking at it until now, that it stops us from meaningful policy dialogue. It stops us from having access to important information to take part in public dialogue. But advocacy can be equally a very powerful tool to fight corruption at all levels, bottom up, national, international level. So we can end on the same way as usual. Advocacy works. It takes courage and time, but it can work. Thank you. Back to you, Albona.
Thank you, Bernd. We are fully aware that a short webinar would not be able to go in depth and answer all questions, which still continue in the chat. With this, we commit ourselves to continue this topic. For this year, the Regional Advocacy Network was committed to tackle the international advocacy as an umbrella topic, broken down into the anti-corruption as a theme. And we see how sensitive it is. Our purpose was to raise even the issue of how important the international dialogue is, while the space for that is shrinking, the space for civil society is threatened, and even for the private sector is narrowed down. What would be the role of the public sector to enhance this dialogue in this difficult situation? So by saying this, I would like to ask our colleague from Moldova, Karina Turcin, to tell us what would be the next station of Regional Advocacy Network. Karina, the floor for you.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. As Valbona said, my name is Karina Turcin, and I'm a policy influencing and advocacy component manager at Optim project, implemented by Helvetas in Moldova. And on behalf of our entire team, I'm delighted to invite you to the event that will be organized from September 9 to 11 in Chisinau, called Advocacy in Changing Times, Strategies for Policy Influence and Impact. The event is organized by Helvetas Regional Advocacy and Helvetas Moldova through the Optim project in close partnership with one of our partners, the European Business Association in Moldova. So for 2 days, you will have the opportunity to participate in practical advocacy training. We will explore how international advocacy tools can help shape public policy, promote inclusive dialogue, and support meaningful reforms, especially in countries on the path to the EU accession. You'll have the opportunity to meet experts from across the region and learn how to work with international frameworks to influence our national agendas, such as the European integration or the EU human rights system and so on. We will also host an international policy forum, which will be joined by representatives of the government, civil society, business association, private sector organization, and the donor community, and so on. Together, we'll discuss how structured dialogue between the public and private sector can drive sustainable development. And beyond the formal agenda, there will be opportunity for study visits, cultural experiences, and of course, networking, real conversations, new ideas, and why not strong partnerships in the future. So if you are passionate about policy influence and advocacy and you want to connect with others working for change in the region, I warmly invite you to join us this September in Chisinau. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing many of you here.
Thank you, Karina, for this good news. May I kindly ask you just to open the camera? Our communication expert pleases us to see the faces, and I'm sure that these are the people who are committed to anti-corruption. We are brave to show the faces. The mission goes on. Thank you for participating. It was great to have you with us. Finally, we believe that advocacy works. Thank you and see you in Moldova.
See you, bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, bye.